Pacers Nation. You are listening to the Pacers Post Up, brought to you by the brothers of basketball, Brad and Ryan, a part of the Believe Sports Network, presented by FanDuel. Pacers fans, let's get into it.
All right, Pacers fans, we are back for yet another episode of the Pacers Post Up. Ryan, oh my goodness, so much going on this offseason, not just for Pacers. Obviously, we've had some small moves, things like that, but the NBA at large feels like this has been one of the busiest off seasons in recent memory. And obviously, the big news, LeBron James finally, after weeks of dragging this thing on, has made his decision. And I know that we reacted a little bit to that on Setting the Pace on the episode that dropped here this morning on Monday. So if you haven't checked that out, Pacers fans, hop on over to Setting the Pace. Be sure to give that episode a listen. But I do want to react a little here briefly on the Pacers Post Up, just to give our listeners kind of an idea of where our heads are at around the LeBron decision, the move to go to Philly. And then it feels like it is the perfect time now to unpack the Eastern Conference, a new look Eastern Conference that is frankly the deepest it has been in probably a decade or more. I as we started this exercise and you start going through teams, you realize pretty quickly that there are a lot of franchises that are, I'm not going to say all in, but they are trending towards wanting to make the playoffs, wanting to be competitive, and then probably a half a dozen or so that are saying it's title or bust. And I can't remember that for the East in quite some time. And so we are going to kick off part one of our Eastern Conference power rankings, ranking basically 15 all the way through the play-in on this episode. So part one is going to be 15 down to 7, and then be sure to stick around for part two as we rank the top 6 seeds in the East. So Ryan, with that, as I said, I want you to give kind of your initial gut reaction on the LeBron to Philly news.
Yeah, the decision waiting period was unbearable. I think LeBron knew pretty early on, especially after that Jaylen Brown trade, that was where he was going to end up. I do give him at least the credit if he is quote-unquote ring chasing, which obviously taking the pay cut, that's what this move is. This was probably, at least in the Eastern Conference, the best team for him to go to just from a basketball fit. But I'm also not surprised that he picks a team that has 4 All-Stars essentially on it. And Maxey is obviously a rising star, made an All-NBA team. Embiid has been an MVP. And then there you have Jaylen Brown's addition, which he was a finals MVP. So a lot of talent on here. And a footnote to this whole thing is the Celtics have to be kicking themselves because the Jaylen Brown trade essentially set up the LeBron move. I don't know if LeBron goes to Philly unless Jaylen Brown is there. And so they've got to be really thinking, Brad Stevens has not made a lot of bad basketball moves since taking over that organization, but this one's going to be really hard to look back at, I think, and see. Although we're going to see where Jaylen Brown feels about this. The ego wanted his own team. Now he's probably the 4th most important, at least media coverage-wise, on this team because of the love Philly has for both Embiid and Maxey, and LeBron will immediately overtake him. So there's going to be some interesting fits. I think we'll see that the offense maybe is a little clunky when they try to play the Embiid matchups. We know kind of how he lives, and Embiid and LeBron kind of at that 4-5 is something you can easily take aggression on, whether it's in the pick and rolls, getting movement. Neither of them really move at like they used to. They both at their peak were really high-level defenders. Not so much anymore. Maxey, Edgecombe, not great defensively. Edgecombe's going to get better, but has a little bit more way to go. Maxey's more just a scrappy, quick defender. So Jaylen Brown's going to take a lot of that on the defensive end. And then offensively, looking at the way they match up, they're going to play with some pace with their top 4 and then have to slow it down with Embiid. Their bench isn't terrible. You've got Simons now on the 1-year deal that was a good get for them. You've got Dean Wade to kind of come out, do a little bit of stretching, a little bit of defense. But to round out my take on this was a full LeBron move. He just likes to make this whole show a circus. and he's continually doubled down on what I don't like about the NBA, which is these new players, these new egos, the star-studded, can only play in certain things, and dragged out a decision that could have been made weeks ago.
Well, Ryan, nothing says all in like living in New York while playing in Philadelphia. And, this is more of what you said, the circus from LeBron James, the pay attention to me tour that did drag on. And now we're going to get the media firestorm that is the most nauseating part of all of this. Yeah. It is the reaction. It is the GOAT conversation. It is the, so what if he's ring chasing? He can become the first guy to win a title on 4 different teams, yada, yada, yada. And I know LeBron pays attention to all of it. He's so tuned in to what people's perception are of him. I think that this is kind of gutless, frankly, as you said it. Philly's not a part of the conversation unless Boston makes that move with Jaylen Brown this offseason. And so it's just one of those things that LeBron is cherry picking where he wants to go, and he is going to try and bolster his legacy here in the back half of the career, maybe for 2 years. He's talked about trying to play for a quarter century, which would be 2 additional seasons here to get to that 25th year. I get it. I understand what he's trying to do. There is an argument from a pace of play perspective if you can set Embiid aside. And that's really the one outlier here. Everybody else plays fast. And I think there are already reports coming out that LeBron's going to be on ball more. They're going to take Maxey off. He was never really a true point guard anyways. And Nick Nurse talked about that even before the LeBron signing. At Summer League, he did one of those interviews kind of with the commentator panel and just talked about how Maxey's tried to get better as a passer, but he's more of a natural scorer. We talked with the guys over at Setting the Pace last night. The usage thing is interesting. I mean, Brown and Maxey were 4th and 5th in the league in scoring last year. You mentioned Embiid as an MVP. He needs the ball in his hands. LeBron's going to need the ball in his hands. The usage was something like 140+% when you started to stack all this stuff together. I still think the crutch for them is going to be defense. How are they conditioned? Are they able to keep up, particularly with a team like Indiana from a pace perspective? It's going to be fascinating. It's going to be nauseating because we're going to be listening to this conversation for months on end. And whether they do great out of the gate, they'll crown them the champs in October. Or if they do bad, they're going to talk about how it takes time and just wait till the postseason. And we're going to have to kind of ride along through all of this. But before we go too deep on that, I don't want to assume where Philly lands in your ranking, but I'm going to guess that they probably aren't in part 1 here this afternoon. So let's get into the power rankings. We'll save some more Philly conversation for the next episode in part 2. And this is where it kind of gets interesting, Ryan, because as we start to unpack the East, you can make the argument that there's only maybe 2, 3 teams that are really rebuilding. And that is what is so interesting about this conference, because you're going to have, yes, I think there are some clear, not quite ready yet teams, but teams that are trying to win. And then there's a bunch of teams that are title or bust or deep playoff run or bust. And that's where we just haven't seen this happen as of late. So I'm going to kick us off and kind of start with my 15th. I think we're probably on the same page here. It is the Brooklyn Nets. They are 50,000 to 1 to win the Eastern Conference on FanDuel. I don't think anybody expects Brooklyn to do a whole heck of a lot. I understand Julius Randle is now a part of the conversation. I think that was more about, what they're trying to, they got to pay somebody and trying to accumulate some assets and things. But am I straying off the path? Do you have anything else from the 15th slot?
I did have a different team at the 15th spot, and that was Milwaukee Bucks.
Wow, okay, so we're off here.
Did I put them at 15 to spite Miles Turner? Maybe. Maybe there's a little bias in there. I think you could go either way. I just look at the Bucks roster. I don't see any high-level talent. We're going to see, some things from the young guys they got from the Heat. They have a bunch of meh players when you go through the whole roster. And so I think you're probably right that the Nets are a worse team, but I don't really know what the motivation is going to be for a lot of these guys. The Milwaukee Bucks organization is just going to be a really weird point where at least the Nets have a direction they're going to, even that if it is losing more. So you're probably right when it's all said and done, but I couldn't miss an opportunity to throw a little Miles Turner shade at the start of the pod.
Well, I don't want to go too far backwards and talk Philly again, but I've seen this floated out there. Is there any scenario? I understand I'm not going to try and make Miles Turner into a Joel Embiid level talent.
Oh, I saw this.
But is there a conversation around Milwaukee saying, hey, we'll take that contract? Again, Embiid's only played, 30-ish games the last couple of years. There's questions about his availability, his ability to run and play fast. Turner's been able to do that. And he's not the same player. Obviously, nowhere near as talented as a Joel Embiid. Any chance that there is a deal built around that sometime this season?
I mean, who knows? I don't know why, if you're a Milwaukee fan, you'd want to take on Joel Embiid's contract. And from a Sixers perspective, you have to take into account that they're going to be making a serious finals run. He did play well in the first round last year, did not play good against the Knicks in the second round, but did have a decent first round. And he is beloved by that city. And I think they'll at least try to make it work before immediately moving off of him at their best chance to win a title.
Yeah, I agree. It's just something that you see. That would be the ultimate get out of jail free card for Miles Turner. Because right now, Miles' move last offseason, egg on the face, whatever you want to call it. I know he got engaged this offseason, good for him, but it doesn't look too great. The grass is not so green in Milwaukee right now.
Grass is brown over there.
It is a pretty rough situation in Bucks land, but I had him at 14, so we're not too far off base here in terms of where we've got the Nets and the Bucks. My 13th team, and Ryan, this is a team that I think has had a pretty damn good offseason, is the Chicago Bulls. Okay. And, you basically pick up a Nick Claxton for nothing. Their front office and organization is very high on Josh Giddey. Montes Buzelis is another young guy that they really like. And then you add in what could be at the number 4 overall pick, the absolute steal of the draft. Because the entire question coming into, Debonsa, Peterson, Boozer, Wilson, etc., we didn't think Wilson could shoot. He did not shoot at North Carolina. I think he had 6 or 7 attempts from long range his entire college career. Comes out in game 1 in the Summer League and starts banging them in. I think he had more attempts in that game than he did his entire North Carolina stint. If he can shoot, this is A, the ultimate missed opportunity for the Pacers, but B, something very real for a Bulls team that's been completely in no man's land for the last couple of years. I still have them at 13, but they're one of the more interesting 13th ranked teams I can remember.
Yeah, they continue to kind of shoot themselves in the foot because they are so much in this middle territory, and that's where they live, and even some of the signings and deals they made kind of leaned that way. But I'm with you that Caleb Wilson's the X factor for them now. If he turns into the star that we think he could, and we were really bullish on him. I think, at least I know when I did my rankings, I had him higher than Boozer, and if he had any of that shot. So they're trending in the right direction. Young talent finally at least seems like they have it. I actually had them at 12. Okay. So only one team below them. And let me get to it because I did have some tier names here that I wanted to get to. So the first tier I had, and they're all based on reality TV shows.
Oh, perfect.
So you'll be very well accustomed to these as we go through them. So the first tier with the Nets and Bucks was The Masked Singer, because that is just who is watching a TV show of bad singers who you don't even know who the singers are, and they sing terrible songs over and over again. My real comp is if they're on the television, I'm not turning them on. They're not getting a single watch this year, probably from me on League Pass. So tier 4 for team 13, this is the only tier I have that only has one team in it. And the 13th ranked, I had the Washington Wizards.
Okay.
And I tiered them at Naked and Afraid. And the reason I put them there for that is I think they were so bored of being boring, they decided to take their clothes off and see if people will watch.
Wow.
And that is what the Washington Wizards are right now. Yeah. I don't know what Trae Young's going to be. He's kind of entering the back half of his career, already has had some struggles, probably is the worst defensive player in the year. The AD saga, was he trying to be traded to Golden State? Does he even want to play there? What's his motivation at this point of his career to be in Washington? Now kind of a true journeyman, only playing 40 games a year. But then you also have Debonsa, who's going to be wildly entertaining, but what's the surrounding package? What's the organization really doing? So I had them on an individual tier myself.
Ryan, it gets icy in Washington, D.C., and DeAndre Ayton cannot make it to games or practice when there's ice on the road. For those that don't remember that, this is a guy that said, I just couldn't make it living in Portland. You know, roads are too icy. Sorry about you. You throw Ayton into the mix with AD, with Trae Young on what has to be now one of the worst contracts in the league instantly. And I know that maybe they promised him something when they got there. I mean, when he opted out, I was like, what the hell is going on here? Because it was clear the league did not value him as a max player. Atlanta was begging to get off of him, move into the Jalen Johnson era. I understand McCollum's a fine player, but he is absolutely in the last couple of years of his, career. And then Kispert, I mean, there was not a market for Trae Young, and now you sign him to a $212 million deal. I don't know how that is going to age. Honestly, I feel a little bit bad for a guy in DeBonsa. They better hope he just pops and is able to make everybody else so much better around him. I had him at 12. So we're just kind of flip-flopping teams as we go down through here. So I had Nets, Bucks, then the Bulls, Wizards, and you had Bucks, Nets, Wizards, Bulls, correct? So that gets us kind of through 15 to 12. This is where it starts to get very interesting because we're still talking about the 11th seed outside of the play-in, right? So these are teams that have really made pushes to be in this playoff conversation. I go 11, Charlotte Hornets. And Charlotte is a very interesting team to me. I actually like so many of their pieces. I think moving off of LaMelo Ball was a smart move. I never thought if you were paying him max money that he was going to be the guy to carry them. I think they are better off putting their eggs in the Brandon Miller, Con Knipple basket. And so those are two players that I really like. They've got some size now. I just am not sure if there's enough playmaking. I understand, you're trying to kind of shoot and run and be this sort of team. They were almost like the Indiana Darling last year because they had such a bad start to the season and then came on really strong late, which is really kind of what we did in that finals run year. I'm just not sure all the parts and pieces are enough to get them over the hump in what is now just a much more robust Eastern Conference. Yeah, well, we were going to insult some fan base at the number 11 spot because, as you said, they're all going to think they're playoff teams, and I had Charlotte at 11 too. And you look at what they did in the back half of the season, and I would get being frustrated if I was a Hornets fan listening to this because you were a top 5 statistical team, advanced stat metric, whatever you want to call it, going into the later half of the season. I do think losing LaMelo hurts. I do think it's a little addition by subtraction. You'll get better in the long run. You'll get more development out of him. But he helped that offense. He hit shots. He played well for them and was an important piece. And it's really more of just a testament to the teams above them now that I just don't know if, can I take that sample size of last year now minus LaMelo and really hold them up to some of the teams we have up here? But they could easily prove me wrong. And one of these young teams that we're going to get to here is likely going to have a big jump. But if Brandon Miller takes a big leap, and Con Knipple does, and Kobe White ends up stepping into that, new point guard role and is able to keep everybody kind of on the same, gelling the same way. And now you've add Naz Reid to the mix. It has there's a lot of talent here. I just have a little bit more talent on teams above them. I don't know where their depth's going to be. So I think these teams here are really close together. And one thing I think we'll kind of get to maybe in the tier 1 or in the next podcast is if you looked at the standings from last year, from basically, I think from 5 down to 10 or something, it was split. It was 43 wins, 43 wins, 43 wins, 39 wins. That's what we're going to be looking at into next season. These between 6 and through 11, we'll call it, is probably going to be separated by some tiebreakers and a couple of wins. And 41 wins might get you in the 8th seed. That's the kind of year we're talking about, a 500 season. And so it wouldn't be necessarily a bad thing if you're a Hornets fan, get another year in growth of development, get one more pick out of this year, and then go all in on maybe a star and really start building around this. Yeah, they're a team that you have to say is trending up. Yeah. And putting them at 11 does feel like a little bit of a slap in the face, but who are you going to drop out? And that's really where this conversation comes to. And I'm going to kind of move us. I want to give you a chance. Do we have a tier name for where we're floating right now?
I'll give it at the end of the tier.
Okay,
so
perfect.
yeah.
All right, let's get through this tier. The biggest reason why I have this next team ahead of Charlotte is really one guy, and it's Paolo Banchero.
Wow.
And I have Orlando, again, a team that took Detroit to the brink, who was the 1 seed last year. Now, I do think that was a very favorable matchup for Orlando because they were able to neutralize some of the size and physicality, and that was sort of Detroit's calling card as the top seed last year. But I can't put Banchero behind a Charlotte Hornets team, right? And I love Brandon Miller and Con Knipple. You mentioned the acquisition of Naz Reid as a part of that LaMelo Ball trade, but Paolo is still a stud, and I think he's a guy that can carry this team a little bit. Another year of continuity with Desmond Bane. Can they stay healthy? That's really kind of the first question. And then, do they have the offensive firepower? Like, I know that Paolo can get his, but a lot of it is mid-range twos, not super efficient. They really rely on guys like Jalen Suggs. I mean, Franz is not a great shooter from outside range. I just think it's one of those things that Orlando, they make a coaching change. I can't remember who they hired.
That's what I was just trying to look up. If you can see me on my screen.
Yeah, because I know there's a coaching change, and I'm not sure who it is at the helm while Ryan looks that up. But I think Orlando is one of those teams that just has really suffered in an NBA that almost requires you to shoot the three ball well. Like, they are just not a team that can keep up. Even though, we have had struggles with them. Like, in terms of size and physicality, I think Zubats changes that. I think Kelly Oubre, frankly, changes that because now you've got another guy with more size and length that you can throw on Paolo instead of trying to ask, Aaron Nesmith to body up, and he's given up 30 or 40 pounds. I mean, I love AA, don't get me wrong, but at a certain point, you just have to be realistic with what the ask is. So it feels low, but I'm going Orlando at 10.
Yeah, I'm with you. It feels low. Sean Sweeney is the new coach, previous assistant for the Spurs, but I had them at 10 as well, so we might go right down the list here as we typically do here on the Pacers Post Up, but I'm with you. I still like a lot of what they bring. Franz needs to stay healthy and find his shot a little bit more. That's been a big struggle. Paolo, there was a point of last season when he had kind of blown the first play-in game where people were about to write him off. Like, there was a serious, is Paolo really a guy? Could they look to move him? They win that second play-in game, like you said, get matched up and have a really solid series against the Pistons. And so he kind of revitalized himself. But they've got an identity around their defensive anchor, or not anchors, but size with Suggs and Bane and Franz and Paolo. And I just think they're a little more battle-tested than the Hornets. That'd be the one thing where if I'm looking at them, why I have them a slight spot ahead is they can probably lean their hat on a little bit more depth and a little bit more experience. And so I leaned the Magic here just slightly. And then I will go one step now to my 9 seed here, which I had the Atlanta Hawks. And don't kid you, the Atlanta Hawks might be one of the deepest teams in the league right now. And this is not even going through their starting lineup, but they got Lou Dort in that trade. They got Aaron Wiggins in that trade. You talk about Kispert's now over there. There was another guy, I forget, off their bench, a big guy. Either way, they've got some serious depth now that they can lean into. Jalen Johnson averaged, high 20s, almost 10 rebounds, like 8 assists, like put up some serious leap numbers there. And so with all that depth and a star level player like Jalen's going to be, I put them a little ahead. They showed some stuff against the Knicks too. They have now gotten a little bit more experience, and maybe I'm weighing too much into it or not enough, but I like what they're doing there. The one thing that keeps them from being a little bit higher, because I think they could be a sneaky team, is I don't know if they necessarily have a true playmaker. I know I just complimented Jalen Johnson, but they're going to be starting CJ and Nickeil Alexander-Walker at the starting point guard, Jalen at the 3. So when the games get a little bit tighter, a little bit slower, and you're trying to just generate one shot, do I trust them as much? Maybe you do with CJ, the way he finished games last year and had big buckets. Maybe you do, but I trust some of these other teams with true star creators to just maybe inch over the line with them a little bit. And that's why I'll finish this and let you give our number 9 is this one is the Love is Blind tier. And that is the Hawks, Magic, and Hornets, because there's a lot of talent here. There's going to be a lot of smoking bodies on the island. There's going to be a lot of attractive people. Those hunting moose suites on the good nights are going to look really good. Or Love Island, sorry, whichever one. It doesn't matter. But there's not a lot of experience here yet. And so I have them at my tier 3 here. So who did you have at 9?
I had the Hawks.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm still trying to digest whether we're going Love is Blind or Love Island.
I meant to say, hold up. It's Love is Blind, and I meant to say, because then I read my other tier and I just spoiled it, but we'll get into that.
Yes.
Love is Blind is because we haven't seen them do a lot yet.
Yes.
So there's some attractive people there. They're kind of figuring it out, but we haven't seen them come together yet. So, sorry.
Still in the pods.
Derailing.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
Orlando is still in the pods, and Atlanta is still in the pods, and that is who I have at number 9. Okay. So, yeah, I'm with you. I think it's one of those things we are seeing, and this is the critique on any team like Philadelphia. It was the critique on the Knicks 2 years ago before the titles run. It's the critique, frankly, on Detroit right now. Depth matters in this league, and there's going to be injuries. There's going to be matchups that kind of stifle what you do in terms of your go-to actions and schemes on defense, etc. So when you have optionality from a depth perspective, and from a scheme perspective, that strengthens your case.
Yeah.
And again, it's hard to, I wanted to put Atlanta higher on this tier, and I think your Love is Blind, kind of analogy is perfect because we just haven't seen it. I understand, they had a little bit of life in that Knicks series, but then Ryan, they got their absolute doors blown off on the back part of that series. Looked like they didn't even show up to the building. That is something that bothers me, right? Because you still had Nickeil Alexander-Walker. You still had Jalen Johnson. You had a team in the Knicks kind of, I don't want to say on the ropes, but maybe questioning things a little bit, and then you just did an absolute disappearing act. But make no mistake about it. From wing defenders, Walker, Dort, Dyson Daniels, Johnson I know isn't a super great defender, but you add Wiggins into the mix, and then they have a rookie point guard in Kingston Flemings, okay? And this was a guy that, was right in that same conversation with Keaton Wagler, who ends up going to the Clippers. Flemings is drafted 8 overall. He's not going to start right out of the gate, but if he is better than advertised or outperforms a little bit, then he might be the guy to kind of slot back in as a natural playmaker once CJ McCollum ultimately decides to move on. Because I do think you're right. Right now, it's sort of Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who's a guy that I love. I mean, he's a Virginia Tech guy. For those that don't know, Ryan and I are big Hokies fans. Our dad's, an alum there. But he was a shooting guard in college. And he's always sort of played off the ball. He had a great breakout year last year with a little more time on the ball. Johnson will be a playmaker. They've got Okongwu who can stretch it. I don't know how physical he is. He's kind of a little bit more Miles Turner-esque with the lob threat. Turner never really had that. But if Atlanta's the 9th best team in your conference right now, this is making the case for why this East is so deep now. So I'm with you. We'll see where we go. I'm hoping maybe we divert here. Because this to me, I think there's going to be some pushback, but I will take us to number 8. This will be our first team in the playoff, assuming things work out from a play-in perspective. I have the Miami Heat. Okay, and I see you grinning. Do you? We'll get to it. Yeah. We'll get to it. God, we agree way too much on this show. I have the Heat because of the depth, right? Yeah. And yes, they make the move for Giannis, but they sacrifice a lot to get that move done. They give away a lot of guys that I think bolstered the back half of that roster. I've said it many years now in a row on this podcast. I do think the world of Eric Spoelstra, but the reality is the Heat really haven't been that good in a while. I understand they made the run with Jimmy Butler there, but that's been now 3, 4, 5 years ago, something like that.
Whatever the bubble was.
These years start to run together, but it's been a while since they've been relevant. And frankly, Ryan, it's been a while since Giannis has been relevant. And I understand that this whole Giannis saga has dragged on and on. I mean, he dragged it on longer than LeBron did. Granted, LeBron was his own decision. Giannis was kind of trying to orchestrate things and had to work with multiple front offices, etc. But what has Giannis done in the last 2 or 3 years that really make you think he should be in the top half of the Eastern Conference? Yes, there's Bam Adebayo. How is that going to work? Can they create spacing and shooting? Davion Mitchell's not really a great shooter. Wiggins, okay. Like, I get it, but you lose a guy in Norm Powell. We didn't even mention him with the Bulls. That was a big Bruce Brown plus signing,
for sure.
right? They signed him on a deal that was similar to the Bruce Brown money, gives him flexibility. He's better than Bruce Brown. And so that's, something that to pay attention to with the Chicago team. But I just think Miami doesn't have enough depth. Giannis has been injured a lot. And I think the league has kind of figured out, okay, build a wall around Giannis, make some other guys beat you. Who else are you really scared of on that roster? And I know they're in the rumor mill for guys like DeMar DeRozan, and we'll see how that all shakes out. Maybe that changes things slightly. Yeah. But I'm not a DeRozan guy. No, it's not. And so it just, what say you on the 8th slot?
I have the Heat, unsurprisingly, in the Love Island tier. And this is because a lot of star power, a lot of names you're going to recognize. There's going to be some really good ups, some things are going. But how does this team really fit together when you actually start to iron it out? Because what you said, the fit with Bam and Giannis, defensively, I think can make sense. Giannis can maybe play a little bit more 5. Bam's a little still agile in his career. But offensively, it's 2 guys who demand the paint, who got to crash. I don't really like that. You talked about the shooting. You probably underplayed it. Their team is terrible at shooting. Davion Mitchell, not a great shooter. Giannis and Bam can't really shoot, won't attempt. You're happy with it if they do attempt from 3. So if you're talking about, is Wiggins your best shooter? Yikes. I mean, compare that to a Pacer team. Between Tyrese and Nesmith and even a Nembhard and Pascal, I'd probably take all of them over Aaron Wiggins just on a night-to-night basis. Maybe the percentages say something different. I don't know where Wiggins finished, but I've watched enough of them to know that. And so I'm with you where the reason why I was able to put them above those young teams, the Love is Blind teams, is because at the end of the day, if I'm talking about, okay, you've got Spoelstra, you've got Heat culture, which is a real thing. You've got Giannis and you've got Bam. I think they beat those teams in a big game. But I don't think they can beat anybody else when it comes down to a 7-game series that's going to be higher on that list, because I think the end of games is going to get really clunky with their fit. Who do you go to? Who is like the pick and roll duo, Davion Mitchell and Bam and Giannis? I don't know where the offense is coming from, and a lot of the things that have kept the Heat up a bit is their depth and pieces, but like you said, Khalil Ware's out the door, Jaime Jaquez is out the door. You just don't have what you used to, and I'm sure they will find somebody who comes out of the woodworks and is solid that nobody knows of, if that makes sense. They always kind of get these player development guys, but even a few of those, and maybe even a buyout market guy, still does not complete this roster enough to really make me scared of their looming run. I just don't think the fit here looks great, and I think largely that's why, like LeBron, probably decided not to go there.
Yeah, they do have Tim Hardaway Jr., okay? Bobby
34,
Portis.
Portis,
There's Jovic. I get it, and I understand that those inside of the Heat fandom are going to sit here and say, you're not giving enough credit to these guys. I mean, we've seen the Portis stuff, and I don't want to discredit what he's done, but he had some games against us, but Hardaway Jr., terrible on defense.
He's on the back 9
for sure. I don't want to be ignorant to some of the periphery moves that they've made. I don't think it's enough, and I think the point that you made is who is handling the ball? Who is initiating the offense? Who is setting guys up? And if it's going to be Giannis, then that's the same thing we saw in the Bucks series 2 years ago. It was like, okay, Doc, we're going to give Giannis the ball, and he's going to set up, AJ Green, and he's going to set up, Gary Trent Jr. and Portis and Brook and these. It didn't work.
No.
Right? And that's kind of the point that I'm trying to get at.
They had more shooting. This Heat team has less. So you're going to be able to put up that wall, the whole thing that the Heat figured out before on Giannis, ironically.
Yeah, correct. So again, we're in agreement there. We're on the same Love Island, if you will, to pick up with Ryan's analogies here. This one feels almost disrespectful.
Okay.
It's a city that I have a lot of love for. It is a city that I used to live in. And it is a city that is coming off a regular season title. And that is the Detroit Pistons at number 7. All right. And for a couple of reasons. Probably the number one reason, I thought they got absolutely exposed in the postseason last year. And Cade Cunningham is a phenomenal player. He was an MVP level talent last year. Should have been a probably bigger part of that conversation, frankly, with how successful their team was. But I think some of the losses that they have incurred this offseason, particularly with Isaiah Stewart, that to me is not a small thing. I mean, I understand they've got, what's the guy's name? Reed. I forget his first name. It doesn't matter. That they're going to try and slot in there. But then you swap out Tobias Harris for John Collins. I understand Tobias, much like a Hardaway Jr. on the back nine. Tobias is a better player than Hardaway Jr. for sure in Miami. But he was, if you watch those playoff games, he was critical. He was kind of the next guy that you would give the ball to if you're Cade. And, now is it going to be Dennis Jenkins? Is he really, I know it's a great story going from two-way. Is he really ready to elevate into that next sort of secondary playmaker? Duncan Robinson doesn't really do it for me. You still have questions about, obviously the Jalen Duren contract and where that's going to go. Asar, probably a top 5 or 10 defender in the league. Can't shoot. Really not a threat. I just start to pick apart their roster, and as everybody else has gotten better, I'm just not sure Detroit has done enough. And this isn't about regular season rankings. We probably should have said that at the onset of the show. This is about who can win the Eastern Conference. I've got Detroit at 7.
I had them at 6, so only one spot above, and we're at least a little different. And part of the reason why I had them a little bit higher maybe is only because I think one of these teams we're talking about in these tiers might not even make the playoffs, where I would be very surprised if the Pistons didn't. If you told me the Heat found themselves in a play-in game and lost 2 games, that is not a shocking outcome for where the East is today. The Hawks could easily come into a matchup like that, win a game, and then you're playing a scrappy, Magic team or whatever, and you got to win and you're out. And so I had them a little higher because I do believe they're still going to be a strong regular season team. I don't think they're going to eclipse probably what they did last year, but knowing that regular season teams who have success like this rely heavily on the defensive end. If you think about a lot of the number 1 seeds, even going back to last year, OKC, defense is consistent. The Spurs, defense consistent. Even with the Cavs made their 64-win season, that was a lot predicated on what Mobley and Allen and that squad was doing from a defensive perspective, and they've gotten a little bit away from that. And so I think their night in, night out consistency on that end will just pose them to be a solid regular season team, which means they likely find themselves out of the play-in, even if one of these top teams has to drop or has to get into kind of a dogfight. And so with that said, I agree with you that I might not even have them beating some of the teams below in a 7-game series because of the offensive end. I just don't know where the creation is coming from Cunningham, but is he the only guy who can really do it? Duren got really exposed on the offensive end, wasn't even playing. You said Stewart's out. Tobias Harris is now out. You've got one shooter in Duncan Robinson. I just don't know where this all fits in for their team. And so I think I have them slightly higher, knowing that they're going to remain competitive. And maybe the only thing I'm kind of putting a little bit is they're a dark horse to make a move in the middle of the season. Yeah. So do they conjure up some contracts? They can take on some money. Are they able to flip somebody and all of a sudden a name that we're not expecting is on their team? They're a little more interesting, which isn't a really fair way to do Eastern Conference rankings, but it's worth bringing up. So I had them at 1 spot ahead. Do you want me to wait on the next one and go in and we'll kind of wrap this episode up and then catch it up for part 2?
Yeah, why don't we do that? Just so we can leave a little bit of a tease. So again, we were going 15 down to 7. So let's kind of just recap. I had Nets, Bucks, Bulls, Wizards, Hornets, Orlando, Atlanta, Miami, Detroit.
Yep.
That is how I went. Read yours down, and we'll kind of tease that last one for the next episode.
I had Bucks, Nets, the Naked and Afraid Wizards, the Bulls, the Hornets, the Magic, Hawks, Heat, mystery team Pistons.
All right, Pacers fans, I cannot wait for what these top tiers are going to be as we unpack really 6, through the final, top seeds here in the East. Ryan, this is a lot of fun. We've gone pretty long here on the first half. As a reminder to Pacers fans, this is the final week for our Hallie 1 Hibiscus giveaway. It's pinned at the top of our profile at Pacers Post Up. Make sure you go enter. We're going to be giving those away on Saturday. Anything else, my friend, before we wrap this one up?
Do we need to shout out a FanDuel line?
No, listen, we're good on FanDuel. I think I had FanDuel Nets plus
Nice.
50,000.
Nice.
So if you want a long shot on the Brooklyn Nets, get yourself some action on that. Listen, Pacers fans, be sure to tune into part 2. Go check out Setting the Pace. We had a great conversation with them over on the weekend. There's going to be another part of that conversation talking about some of the young talent on the Pacers roster. You won't want to miss that. Check it out over on their channel. And then we've got a fun crossover coming up on Friday. We're going to record that live here. So plenty of exciting things going on from a Pacers post-up perspective. Pacers fans, appreciate you guys listening. As always, go Pacers.